Good evening, everyone. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, on behalf of the committee, we would like to welcome you to the 2022 Nordby Grief and Loss Lectureship Series in memory of those we've lost. My name is Amy Harms-Hode, and I am the Human Services faculty here at North Hennepin Community College. Our event tonight will focus on remembrance and healing from our losses, as well as provide a space for honoring those whom we have lost. Just a few things before I introduce our keynote speaker. First of all, I'd like to just make sure that everyone is aware we are recording this event. For your optimal watching, you as participants are invited to change your Zoom view settings from gallery to speaker. This can be done by clicking on view in the top right-hand corner of your screen and making sure that speaker is checked. The presentation tonight will consist of our keynote speaker sharing information about what we might be feeling as we contemplate the losses in our lives and how they can affect us. There will be time for questions and discussion after the keynote presents. So make sure to jot down any questions or thoughts you might have while he is talking so that you can share them at a later time.
Hello, I'm Johanna Gangle. I'm a therapist here at NHCC. I have a couple little pieces to introduce and to let you guys know. First and foremost is sort of we'll call it a disclaimer. I like to think of it as sort of like informed consent for what you're getting into. So we give you permission to feel your emotions during this event. It will feel like suffering, potentially, and that's okay. If you find you need a listening ear to process those feelings, please reach out to the Minnesota Mental Health Warm Line. It's funded through Manami. Their number is 877-404-3190 or text support to 85511. I'll also pop this stuff in the chat if I can find it. If you find yourself falling into crisis and feeling like suicide is an option or something else more drastic, please call the National Suicide Prevention Hotline at 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HOME to 741-741. So again, disclaimer, you get to feel your emotions. We give you permission to do so. The next piece is a little bit more of an introduction to something that'll be coming up later in the presentation. Part of this, as you might have seen if you saw the invites, is we'll be showing a sort of memorial video to those we've lost. I invite you, if you have not emailed us already with a picture of a loved one and their name, so I can put their name on there as well, that would be great to do so. The email is nordbylecture@nhcc.edu. And again, I'll figure out how to pop all this into the chat. And that's nordbylecture@nhcc.edu if you'd like to be added to the memorial program. And if you don't have a photo, say you want to honor someone anyway, we will be doing a live word cloud. So you'll have a chance to, using your computer or your phone, to enter in their name after that memorial video that'll play after our presentation. So those are my reminders, and I will again pop those in the chat once I figure out how to do so, and I will pass it on over.
At this time, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. This evening, we have Ben Musburger, a friend of North Hennepin Community College for several years. Ben is a licensed marriage and family therapist and educator. He enjoys helping people as they navigate the facts of life, including growth, change, and death. Ben has provided grief care to the community for the past 10 years via a local hospice agency. He believes that loss and death orient us toward life. At this time, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome Ben.
Thank you, Amy. And can I get an audio confirmation that you can hear and see me?
Thumbs up.
Yes, I can. You are good.
All right. Thank you so much. Well, I want to start tonight with saying some thank yous. Thank you so much to the Nordby family and North Hennepin Community College for hosting tonight's event. I'd also like to thank the event planning committee. It's a pleasure to meet people who are in our midst who deeply care about the well-being of the not only North Hennepin Community College community, but also the community at large. And I just want to say it's a pleasure being involved with a group like you. I'd like to thank my kids in advance for a quiet bedtime. And maybe if I say that out loud, I can will it into reality. But if not, I guess there's a disclaimer as well. I think tonight's important for a lot of reasons. And one being that as a society, we lack spaces to grieve. We don't have many opportunities to come together and acknowledge something that we all go through, something that we all experience. And I think tonight in that regard is a very special opportunity for us. So thank you to everyone who's made that a possibility. I also want to say thank you to everybody who's here tonight. I appreciate the courage it takes to have a rendezvous with grief, which is what we're here for. There's a lot of vulnerability and discomfort in that experience, and I want to acknowledge that part of you being here tonight. You are here because of people, right? People who are important to you. I'm imagining we're here for spouses and partners and parents and cousins and uncles and grandparents and kids. We're here for mentors, for classmates, for teachers, for peers, maybe just acquaintances that made an impact on our lives. We're here tonight for people. And I sit here humbly before you, even with internet connections between us, just in awe of that, that you are here for someone or multiple someones. I think it's important just to say that while I have professional and personal interest in matters of grief and death, there is much to this I remain ignorant to. So thinking of you tonight, there's much I don't know. I don't know exactly who has died in your life. I don't know what they've meant to you, how this has impacted you, your family. I don't know how your world's been turned upside down, and anything I say tonight isn't going to do any of that justice. And I just want to acknowledge that I'm saying words here and you're living this. And I want to say to you, my sincere condolences to you and all due respect to the deceased. So I think one of the things that I like to make sure we just acknowledge in a talk like this is we are here in a shared experience. An experience that every human has in common. You know, that regardless of our lot in life, where we come from, our age, the color of our skin, our gender identity, religion, our sexual orientation, our successes, our failures, our political views, our decisions, our lifestyles, regardless of any of that, we all encounter death. We do. And I think that is one of the greatest pains of our experience. And it's something you're intimately familiar with. It's brought you here tonight. And I think the pain is twofold. It's one, we are conscious beings that have self-awareness. And as far as we know, we're the only living beings that can have insight that we will die. And not only us, we know that other people that we share this world with will also die. So we have this awareness that really, really hurts. And when there's somebody in our life who has died, we become very, very aware of that. Then there's also the pain we feel when we have a death in our life, which we'll talk a lot about tonight. This idea of grief as being that pain. So I want to pay respect to this, that we carry these pains. And I also want to talk a bit about grief and death in a different way. That the sorrow part, we're quite clear in. You know how this hurts. You know what this feels like. And there's also something about grief that's a very fertile ground. And I'm using this metaphor intentionally because it's springtime and we live in Minnesota for some reason. And the thaw is upon us, and we're going to be seeing the ground come alive after a time of desolation. So I think life, grief, and death are also like that, that in this fertile ground, there's things about life that are affirmed. There are things about this that are life-giving. There's things found here that are restorative, things that encourage our growth. And I would like to spend my time with you tonight talking about these aspects of grief. One might say I have rose-colored glasses through this, and that could be true. But I say these things to you having talked with people who've told me these things. I'll do my best to represent them with accuracy. But I hear people finding these sources of life within these dark places. To quote Kafka, this is a quote that's really got me thinking lately, is that the meaning of life is in its end. That there's a close encounter here that teaches us about living and about our lives. I'm going to use a metaphor tonight of grief and death as a teacher. For a community college, I thought that might work, but I think it's instructive. I think there's lots we can learn from this if we open our hearts to grief and we open our hearts to this experience. We can respond differently to it. We can learn how to approach it. We can maybe even welcome and appreciate it. And that might feel like a stretch right now, but I hope to demonstrate that to you tonight. So I'm going to be talking about some themes in this fertile ground with grief as our teacher. And my invitation to you is that, like grief, some of this stuff is going to feel universal. It's going to say, yep, that sounds like what I've been through and what other people have talked about when I've mentioned this to them. That fits. Great. Please welcome that fit. There's also going to be some things that don't fit. Grief is also very unique, and nobody does it exactly the same way. Nobody feels exactly the same thing. So please just ignore that stuff. And then there's going to be things that I would say are in the middle ground. These things that I invite you to be open to the possibility that this is true, or that this could be true for you. I'm going to start with something that might be a risky place to start for me, but it's about grief itself. And what I would like to say to you is trust your grief. Trust in it. Follow its lead. There's a saying that brings true to me, is that grief is its own medicine. Grief is our natural process of healing from loss. We as human beings have ways of healing. We know this physically. If we get injured riding our bikes or something like that, we trust that our body will heal itself. I think grief is that way too, that our hearts, that our souls have a way of healing, and that way is through grieving. So grief is its own medicine. And why I think this is a stretch is this hurts, right? Grief does not feel at all pleasant usually. It's tormenting. It doesn't feel exactly like a positive trajectory that if I just go along with this grief, everything is going to be okay. In fact, it often feels like the opposite of that, that I'm losing it, that I'm falling apart, that something's really wrong with me. Those experiences are normal. I think a lot of us have them when we're suffering and when we're struggling. But then I start thinking too about the process for healing often hurts. If we have a surgery and need to recover from that, that is incredibly painful. If we want to help our bodies get stronger and fitter, exercise, that hurts. Boy, does that hurt. I don't know because I haven't done it in a while, but it does hurt if I recall. These other pursuits of healing and these pursuits of well-being and health, like grief, hurt. So hurt doesn't necessarily mean it's not good for us. If there's one thing you leave here tonight with, it's this simple message that grieving is healthy. Do it. Changing your eating habits hurts. Changing any habit hurts. Grieving is healthy. So this trusting of grief, what do I mean by that? I mean that in your grief what you need. And I hear this all the time from people. They say things like, I'm not ready to throw away their clothes. I'm not ready to get rid of them. Okay. Your grief is telling you something there. Or at this holiday, I need to keep a seat at the table open for them because it's just not the same without this person there. Okay, let's keep that seat open. Or, you know what? I'm so shook up today that I'm going to stay in bed a little bit longer. Okay. So part of, I think, the challenge of this is to put away some of our notions about what's healthy and what's good and right, and really follow where our grief takes us. Maybe that's crying at the drop of anything. Maybe that's reevaluating your whole life. Go where the grief is. There's a wisdom there, and you know how to heal. Tonight, we're going to have a chance to do some of this. We're going to be moving into grief. So I would like to just extend that you can follow your grief tonight. You can trust your grief tonight. Grief also causes us to look at our relationships. So I like to think I'm a marriage and family therapist, right? So I kind of think about things in relationship terms. But grief is a relational event. Our relationship has changed with someone or something. Grief doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's between you and something in the world or someone in the world. One way to think about grief is that it's a companion of love and connection. So anytime we commit ourselves to connection, commit ourselves to love, or maybe just find ourselves in that kind of bond, we're also committing ourselves to grief. Because if that bond is severed or broken or someone dies, we will mourn that. So grief and love go together hand in hand. And I think when we look at relationships through the lens of grief, that love becomes very clear. And there's a deep evaluation that happens where we look at the deceased, we look at other people in our lives, we look at ourselves, and we look at life itself and how do we relate to this thing that we do every day, sometimes without even really thinking about. So I'd like to talk about these relationships and the deepening of the relationships that can be brought about when we're grieving and when we have a death in our lives. I'm going to start with the relationship with the deceased. I don't know. I'm beyond the language of need to move on, need to let go, need to get over it. No, I don't find that to be accurate. With our relationship with the deceased, I think the challenge is, how do we keep the connection? How do we keep this important relationship in our hearts, in our minds, in our days? Obviously, the relationship is different now. It can't be the same, but there can still be a relationship. So some questions to think about as you trust your grief is how do you continue to show love to people who have died? How do you continue to show thanks to them for the impact they've had on you? How do you continue to make time for them? Because relationships, all important relationships, warrant our time. They warrant our energy. So how do we do that? How do we continue to work on the relationship? No relationship's perfect. At least I haven't ever encountered that. Maybe it's just me because I'm in the relationships, right? No, but no relationship's perfect. We all carry things that we wish we would have done differently, mistakes we've made, regrets. Keep working on those. That doesn't have to stop because the person has died. We can still offer forgiveness. We can still give apologies. That relationship still matters. We can also think about this in terms of our lives. I mean, one of the powerful things about other humans is we can be influenced by them. They shape us, they change us. We are better people. We are more fully people because of the people in our lives. And we can continue that. We can continue honoring the people that have died through how we live, through how we approach every day that we have here. And something that I as you trust grief, and this might help you if you're on the fence, what if, and this is a stretch, right? What if your sorrow and your crying and your shaking and upset stomach and all of that, what if that's keeping this person in this world? What if that's what you're doing when you're grieving? Is that you're keeping them here with you and you're keeping them alive in your life and in your relationships. So let grief and let death not end your relationship. Let it deepen it. Let it change your relationship. Sorry, I get a little choked up. That should have been a disclaimer too. The other thing I just want to put out there. So it's not only the people that are gone. When death happens, it causes us to look at the other people in our lives, right? Like, whoa, am I looking at these relationships in a way that makes sense when death is giving me perspective? Am I getting worked up about things, being bothered, irritated, upset, annoyed about things that really, when held up against life and death, don't really matter all that much? Am I fighting about dirty dishes again right now? Is that really how I want to be in this relationship? Or all the other ways that, these ways we aspire to be as people and in relationship with other people that we care about. What are my standards? What are my guideposts as a human being in relationship with other human beings? Grief and death can point us in the way, point us to how we want to show up. The other thing that, and this is what we're doing tonight, and internet connections, whatever. The other thing that people need when they're grieving is they need to bring that into relationship with others. Private pain is intense pain. And one of the things that I want to encourage, and we're going to live it, is that we don't need to keep this pain to ourselves. These are pains that we all know. They're pains we've always known. And we can give them voice, and we can share, and we can receive them. And if we do that, it's diminished. How many times have you said, wow, that just really felt good to talk? Why do therapists even have jobs? It's because that very thing is we need a place to bring this. It's too heavy to carry alone, and we need a witness. And we as grievers, I think it's hard because we're risking a lot. We're needing to put ourselves out there, and we're scared of what, like rejection, we're scared of abandonment, we're scared of invalidation, we're scared of being judged, we're scared of a lot of different things. And to me, I think it's worth the risk, because even if we receive that kind of response, what we're doing is we're putting ourselves out there, and we're contributing to a culture that is grief literate and that is supportive of people. And you as a role model, somebody that if you take that leap, you have now said, I am somebody that you can come to because I understand what this is like, and I'm open to your sharing. So let grief in this way work on our relationships with the people who are living with us. Let it change us. And as you might imagine, where I'm going with this is also this needs to change ourselves, right? That grief changes our relationship to ourselves, as it should. For me, and this is something that I think is ingrained in us, one thing I hear a lot is that people are really needing to become skilled in the arts of self-compassion and infinite patience. That when we are down, when we are struggling, when we are hurting, we don't always respond to ourselves with love and care. We're often much more caring and supportive to other injured souls that we encounter along the way. So part of this is us learning to be kind to ourselves, to take it easy on ourselves, to watch how we talk to ourselves, to not say things like, wow, I'm throwing myself a pity party, but instead to say, I'm grieving because I need to grieve. We also have to tolerate, I think, a culture of what we consider health and wellness and the medical models that perpetuate this, right? Like if we're sad too long and we're scared too long and we're anxious too long and our stomach hurts from too long, there's this idea that something is wrong with us, that we better go get medical care or treatment. And yeah, there is something wrong with us. Somebody we love died. That's what's wrong with us. So there's this opportunity here to approach yourself in a new way, a way that where you can tend to your hurts, like you would do for somebody else. Another thing that's here for ourselves, and you'll hear people to describe this as grief and death bring about some kind of understanding within us about how strong we are. That we're tested in these ways, and our resilience and our ability to weather adversity becomes very clear to us. And we can find strength we didn't even know we have when we're facing the challenges of life. And I want to say one word, and I suggested this before when we were talking about our relationship with other people and the relationships with the deceased. But there's also a chance in here to forgive ourselves, that we are also fallible human beings. And can we let ourselves off the hook for something that happened in the past that we can't change? Can we find that compassion to say, yeah, I made a mistake and I'm sorry, and I'm not going to carry this with me indefinitely into the future. So you take these things, and this is getting a little out there, and I apologize if it is, but our relationship with life is changed by this. Our life. So in the shadow of death and in this grief, we become aware of something. And amongst, commutes and iPhones and the grind of the day and all the stressors and things that we've got going on in our lives, we can lose sight of this. But the message is this, and it's a simple message, that this is all precious, that we have a precious thing here, and that any moment shared is special, is beautiful. That we don't get these moments back, And think about that as you reflect tonight. Think about your loved one and think about the memories you have. And I guarantee that some of the things that come up to you are the most random, banal, everyday kinds of things that you could ever imagine. Like, yeah, you might remember the trip to Mexico. That's cool too. But there's just so much in these days, in this time shared. And grief and death teaches us that, right? It's now. This is it. It's all right here, right now, in this moment. And we're not going to get it back, at least as far as I know. So let's live like that. Let's let some of this creep into our lives, not because we're gluttons for punishment, but because we can see that if we hold this, if we hold what we've known, if we hold what we've lost, if we hold what's once in a lifetime, if we truly hold that, it changes us. It changes how we see things. It changes how we treat people. It changes how we see the world, our belief system, our spirituality. It changes how we might act in any situation. A chance to just say thank you, say I love you, say I'm sorry, say I forgive you, just say yes. Say yes. We're all enrolled in this class of life, and right now, you being here tonight, you've got one of the ultimate teachers to offer you something wise, that you can use and that you can learn from. So I invite you to be open to that lesson. I'm going to conclude this tonight with an idea I stole from somebody else. I'm known to do that. No, but it's from a guy named Martin Prechtel, and he talks about grief as praise, which is an interesting way to frame this. So let's hold this tonight as we take some moments to reflect on your loved one and reflect on their memories and reflect on what they've meant to you. That grief is praise. It's a calling out, a crying out of what was truly important in this world. It's an acknowledgement of what we had to taste and experience and feel and live, that precious beauty and that complexity that is this world. What if all of these tears and all of the sobs and the wails and the screams and all of that is us celebrating our existence and celebrating the life we've had the privilege to share with other people. And grief is our tribute to them and to this world. So as we talk about our loved ones tonight, as we read poetry and look at photos and take a moment to pause and reflect and be together, let us grieve. Let us praise all this life, and let us remember the people we have lost. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for that very moving speech and the conversation about grief, and the very important reminder to just feel it and what a teacher it is. So at this time, I will share my screen and we will take it'll be about 4 minutes is how long the memorial video is. And as soon as that's done, I'll pop back on and we'll put up the word cloud so folks who weren't able to send a photo can also share the names of their loved ones. So bear with me momentarily while I make sure all of my settings are the way that they're supposed to be. I can get that sharing. Are you seeing a video titled "In Memories of Those We've Lost"?
Yes, we are.
Yes, perfect. I never trust Zoom. Never
Me
trust
neither.
Okay. So take a moment, be about 4 minutes long. bring up the instructions for the word cloud. Bear with me for a moment. Okay, so what you should be seeing on your screen is a QR code. Next to it is also a website and the code you can enter if you'd like. That should get you into the next piece of the word cloud. So I'll keep that up another like 20 seconds, and then I will shut off my video and we'll make it the word cloud. I'm seeing a couple people liking stuff, which means that we got some people coming in, which is good. Okay, do another 5 seconds, and then we'll switch over to the next slide. Okay, so at this time, you should be prompted to be able to add a word to the word cloud for the folks who were logged in. Okay. Looks like we're still getting a couple more entries. I think of this kind of like a beautiful representation of our connection. And as Ben was talking about, we've all lost people. We've all struggled. We've all suffered with that. And this is such a great way to show that in a very physical manner by honoring the people that we've lost. I appreciate folks who are just adding in words, I think, and feelings and experiences. I think that really adds to this. We'll keep this up another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll move on with our presentation. I so appreciate as it keeps growing, so I'm not going to cut anybody off yet. People still have stuff to say, feel free to enter it. People to honor. So many parents lost, as the words that are larger are repeats. So it means more than a few people said mom and dad. Thank you for engaging with us so actively, everybody. I appreciate that. We seem to be in a temporary pause. Take a moment to look at all these names and these experiences and this shared grief. Thank you for taking this moment to share a piece of your pain with us. It's so important. Oh, we're moving again. Okay, we'll keep it up for about 15 more seconds and then we'll move on with the presentation. So any last thoughts? Don't worry, you will get some time to talk and ask questions and share experiences. So that's mostly what I want to make time for in addition to this. Okay, thank you, everybody. I'll pop it down now.
Hello, my name is Julia Salinas, and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. I'm the social worker at North Hennepin Community College, and I'm going to read a short poem for you today by John Mark Green. How do we go on after the unthinkable happens? How can we carry the burden of knowing the world can be cruel and dangerous, the future so unpredictable? How do we grieve with empty arms and a head filled with echoing memories? We are stronger than we know, and this is how we show it. Holding each other, giving comfort in the midst of pain, loving more fiercely through our actions and the things we say, making the world just a little bit better every single day, never taking life for granted, knowing that it can be snatched away. This world may bring deep darkness, but we are the bearers of light. We'll join our flames together and shine in the blackest of nights. Thank you.
Thank you, Julia. At this time, we really would love for you to share with us what you're feeling, what you're thinking, any questions that you might have. Ben, I have heard Ben speak, gosh, I don't even know anymore, 5, 6 times. And every time I write down something new. And so poignant and just so applicable to life that we are living in every day. So if you have something to share, please feel free. You can go ahead and use the raise hand reaction at the bottom of your screen. There's a reactions button, and if you click on it, it just says raise hand. You can address if you have a question or if you just have a comment, whatever you would like. I will do my best to call on you as I see you. We do really appreciate those of you who are willing to turn your cameras on. It's good to connect right now, to see faces.
Agreed. Thank you for that, Amy. Also, if you have questions for Ben or any of us, we really just want, as Amy said, an opportunity for you to engage, and I'll be assisting Amy best I can to make sure that everyone has their opportunity if they'd like to share or to ask questions or speak.
Kayla, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a question for Ben, or anybody who likes to write too. Is there like a prompt of when you're processing your grief or missing the person that you love? Like, is there a prompt that would be helpful to start writing or get those thoughts and emotions out?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Writing, I think, is a generally useful way to get some of these things out of us and onto paper, and it just comes out a little differently through writing. There's 10 prompts I generally like, and I'm needing to remember what those are off the top of my head. But I think anything that can access like memories or things left unsaid, things that like around forgiveness, I think those are generally helpful. So I'll just rattle some off here that I've found to be constructive is, things like, I'm thankful for this. One one thing I remember about you is this. If I could go back and change something with you, it would be this. I forgive you for this. One, you have changed me through this. Anything that can kind of create a dialogue between you and the deceased, I think is helpful. If I had to try to paraphrase what these questions are, it's a conversation. I think those are the prompts I've found to be most useful, is when you are writing in a way that is really a conversation with the person, if that makes sense. Yeah, write to them. And I've seen some people that'll actually they'll write back too, from their perspective, that when we know people so well, we even could imagine or think what they might say in return. Or some people can channel that, or they can feel how their loved one would respond to them. So I think there's a way to have a dialogue through written word that can be very powerful and moving.
Good, thank you.
Amy, can I just jump in real quick?
Absolutely, Carly.
I'm one of the counselors at North Hennepin as well. I'm Carly. And you'll be getting a packet at the end. Someone will talk more about that, but there's some journal prompts in there and other activity prompts of things that you can engage in to kind of interact with your grief more. Think about activities, things like that. So just so you know, you'll be getting some more information on that too.
Good, thank you, Carly. Davey Leitner, I'm so excited to see you, Davey. Oops, you're muted still, buddy.
Oops. It's good to be here. It's good to see you, Miss Amy. Good to see everyone. I had a question for Ben, and it's maybe how would you combat shame attached with grief? Maybe somebody, I can speak in my life, people who have died, who've had mental health or substance use issues, and you feel like I coulda, shoulda, woulda, if I would have done this, I would have done that, it would have turned out differently. These kinds of hypotheticals. I'm just wondering from your vantage point, what you would suggest to help a person deal with that type of issue.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that question. That is a complicated situation, and it's not uncommon. I think most people have some things that they would do differently given the chance, and those kinds of thoughts and feelings that go along with them are definitely very painful to carry, that there was something I could have done and should have done, and then what would have happened, and it carries that second kind of pain too, of just, and if I would have done that, would things have been differently, or would that have changed things? I mean, I don't know if there's a standard approach to it. For me, I think often what it is okay, is that something that can be brought forward? So is there something from the past that I can now learn from and apply to my life in the present? And I think some people that's helpful to, because it takes that painful thing from the past and now makes it something positive. And there's a saying I like to say to some people, it's I don't know where it comes from, but it's something along the lines of, I did then what I knew then, and I do now what I know now. So it's this acknowledgement that in the past I was doing the best I could with what I knew, and if I would have had a crystal ball or different skills, or however I want to think about it, I might have done differently. But now that I know this, now that I've learned this, I can change in the present. Because I think that's one of the hard things about shame and regret, is we can't go back. Like we can't go back and redo things and change what happened. So it's trying to bring that into the present, where we can make difference and make change. The other thing I think that can be tied up in that sometimes, and this is something too, and I have a complicated relationship with this myself, in full disclosure. I think sometimes the thought that we have control of things is very comforting to us. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. Like, if I could do X, Y, and Z, that means I could have done something about it. And I think when we look back on our lives, often there isn't much we could have done, and if we did do differently, there's no guarantee that anything else would have happened from that. So I think sometimes the thought that we can control things if we would have is a little deceptive. And it might be more scary in some ways to think, wow, I couldn't have changed this, or I couldn't have done anything back then differently. And that carries its own burden, if you will. So I think exploring that space, what is my relationship with control, and is that something that I can modify or explore more deeply? Otherwise, it's amazing, those prompts, and just writing yourself a forgiveness statement or something. I just say, I'm sorry I did this. I've seen that be really helpful. I think that's sometimes what regret wants from us, is it wants us to apologize, and it wants us to acknowledge the harm caused, and it wants us to learn from it. So if we can somehow incorporate those things, it might help in our healing. But I would say largely, David, your question is one that lacks simple answers. I think it's something that really needs to be wrestled with, and appreciate the struggle there.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Yeah.
Thank you, Davey, for that question too.
Yeah.
Michaela.
So this may be kind of tied into what was said before, but I know in my experience with very close grief, anger and being really, really bitter, really just angry, is a really, really visceral emotion that comes through for me. And it's something that I've kind of seen in some other people too. So this is kind of a broad question, but I'm more just kind of curious how to, even begin to kind of combat that anger. I think that, at least for me, part of it is coming from just being really sad. But I've had a really hard time just getting rid of that, like bitter, like the best way I can explain it is like bad taste in your mouth feeling that just sits there like constantly. And, that kind of, that is what it is. And that's just my, kind of interpretation of it. But I'm wondering if there's ways like Ben, maybe that you or even Amy or some of the other counselors have, seen people be a little more successful kind of dealing with that, or,
Yeah.
somewhere from there.
Yes. No, thank you for the question. I guess generally where I start with things like anger and other feelings that we're having is I'm of the frame of mind that they're all there for a reason. So there are reasons that anger is your feeling, and really trying to understand the purpose of anger, that all of our feelings have a purpose. They all have a reason for being there. So instead of like trying to get rid of it or even squash it down, really moving alongside of it, and trying to get curious about it. So, when does anger come around? When does anger get really fired up? What else is happening in your life when anger arrives? Just to try to, I actually kind of pretend like it's a person that I'm trying to get to know. Anger, what are you so pissed off about?
That's exactly how it feels. It's like a whole nother person almost that you're like battling with, and it's your own self.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating.
You could even ask anger, anger, what are you so worked up about? And see what it says back to you. So anger, just generically speaking, and I don't know your circumstance, so I'm speaking from a place of anger. Is generally, kind of a protective feeling, that it shows up to protect us and protect other vulnerable emotions that we might be having. So when I see anger, that's one of my points of curiosity is, are you trying to protect me from something here, anger? And thank you for that. That can really start to turn things on its head too, is if we start thanking our feelings for whatever purpose they're there for. And anger is great at protecting us, both from external situations and also sometimes from our own internal hurts, that it's easier, in some ways, for us to feel angry than to feel afraid, or to feel anxious or confused or vulnerable. So anger is helpful. I would generally say, and just trying to understand it more. I'm open to
Awesome,
other.
thank you.
I'm open to other counselors and their frameworks that they operate from as well.
Any thoughts on bitterness, Ben?
Yeah, bitterness. I mean, I would say similarly. Just trying to figure out why it's there, and it has some validity. It has a reason for being there, is my personal belief. Bitterness. I think bitterness often, when I've seen it, is sometimes it's trying to right a wrong. It's identified something that was wholly incorrect or awful about something, and it's wanting that corrected or addressed. Maybe it's trying to say, I don't want this to happen again to me, so I need to hang on to it. But yeah, I generally with feelings, I think what's hard with feelings is that we have an aversion to them because they hurt, right? Like a lot of these feelings cause us a deep pain. And then we also have a lot of messages around how we should be feeling, and that happy is the default mode. And if you deviate from happy from too long, something's wrong with you, right? So I think that we have a lot of judgment and shame around how we feel, and we try to dismiss them and squash them down. So I think just trying to be really open to it. There's nothing wrong with how you feel. I mean, how you feel is how you feel. And perhaps the challenge is in how do we cultivate that line of inquiry and that openness and that curiosity to it. And then it can work for us. But every feeling I've ever met, if I can say that, it's doing something. It's doing something. It's helping you often in some way. And it's trying to figure out, how it's helping you. And we can also say sometimes that our feelings, we don't like what they're doing, and we don't like how we act when we feel that way. So sometimes I think our feelings can kind of become polarized in some way, like they are trying to do too much for us, or trying to help too much, or they're too stuck in their ways, and we need to try to create some flexibility so that we can navigate that experience a little differently. And again, I'm open to other counselor frameworks here. I mean, there's different ways of looking at this stuff, right? And the way I look at it's just one way of looking at it.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. I appreciate your point of view. Julia Carroll, you have your hand up.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me while I'm trying to start the video? I guess.
Yep, we
Hi,
can
Julia.
hear you. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. First of all, I would like to I will talk slowly because of my accent. I know it takes time for people. Thank you to other participants who talked about shame and grief and anger. It answered some of my questions. My question is very generic because everybody knows about 5 stages of grief, even before even actually experience grief. So when I experienced that, my husband died from glioblastoma, stage 4 cancer.
I'm sorry.
And so when I started reading about it more, what are those 5 stages? We all know their names, but I probably would like if you kind of like talk about them briefly and talk more about bargain stage, because I still kind of don't understand what were bargain for what. I mean, acceptance, easy to understand, anger and depression. And I heard that new researchers talking about more stages than 5. I wonder if it's true, and if there is any like way they're coming, because again, I heard there are different stages for every person. Do they ever end? Because again, I heard from my counselor, they actually never end. So you either live in constant depression or finally acceptance, but it's not something you went through all 5 and they're done. So very maybe traditional questions, but I would like educate if it's possible.
No, thank you for, I can tell you've looked into this and studied this matter, and my sincere condolences to you about your husband as well. Yeah, I think, where do I think I've got some thoughts here. So stage models in general, I think one of the useful things about them is it helps people kind of put themselves in a certain experience. So, with a 5-stage model, Yulia, as you're describing, you can kind of notice, okay, I think I'm right here right now, and maybe I'm right here today. So I think in terms of helping us conceptualize what we might be going through, they're very, very useful in that regard. And the Kubler-Ross model, I think, is the one you were referencing at the beginning, which I think came out in maybe the 60s or early 70s. And she'd studied people that were dying and talked about the different stages that people go through as they approach death. And then it's become kind of adapted for grief over time. I think, I often don't speak of stage models just because I think one of the hindrances of them, or maybe drawbacks of them, is in my experience, when I talk to people, they might be in 10 stages in a day or an hour. It's often a very fluid experience people have, and it changes from minute to minute, day to day. And I think some kind of, I actually have a graph that I should have brought in preparation for this, is there's this drawing that says, like, here are my stages, and it's just like a scribble, like there's a big just scribbly line everywhere. And I think that's often how what it looks like, is that people are moving between experiences. Maybe some experiences they feel like they move beyond or through. Other experiences they recur and come back. And personally, I think we're grieving all the time. I've met with people that thought they were done grieving 20 years ago when their spouse died, and now all of a sudden they've encountered something fresh, something new, something they haven't explored before. So I do kind of like to view it as this never-ending cycle that's maybe not even a cycle. It's sort of just this thing that's happening every day in real time. And then maybe what you're saying too, and maybe this is a helpful thing of the stage model, so I'm kind of contradicting myself a bit, is I think people sometimes can feel kind of stuck in a place. They come to some part of this experience where I feel like I'm just here and nothing's happening and I can't move through this. And those places, I think, definitely get our attention. And they might be places where it really warrants, conversation with a professional or some kind of support person. I would say, kind of like I said before, that I think when we get stuck, that's useful too. There's some reason for us needing to pause there and be in that place. But it's also very frustrating, and also can feel kind of defeating when we feel like we're not seeing that movement and change within our experience. Bargaining, that was, I think, a specific question you had within the stages. I kind of like to think about that as, it's not quite like denial. It's maybe kind of like a stage of denial in some ways, like there's something I can do to change this, or this didn't really happen. Some kind of negotiating with reality that we're attempting to do. And one way I like to see that specific place is that it's sort of like letting the pain in. So I like to think of like a funnel, I guess, that all of us have a certain amount of pain we can receive at one time. And if we receive too much pain at once, that's where trauma happens. That's where we become emotionally just shut down and overloaded. So I think our bodies and our minds and our souls and all that have like mechanisms of kind of throttling back. So I think bargaining is one of those ways, is that if I can convince myself that this didn't happen, or this isn't true, or we can figure this out, it softens the pain that's coming in at once. It's just letting a little pain in at a time without taking on the full magnitude of it. Hey,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, better your kids than mine. Yeah, I think mine went to bed, so I'll take it. Yeah.
Sorry, yeah, I'll just.
No. Hello. Yeah, I don't know, did that answer your question at all?
Yes, no, thank you. It just, yeah, became a little bit, clearer. So thank you so much. Yeah,
Yeah, thank
put
you.
mute. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ben. Tana.
Hi.
Hi.
I have more of a comment just for Ben. This is actually the second time that I have had the honor of hearing you speak. And both times I have been so full in a good way. And I just want to thank you for taking the time to speak with us and for even being so vulnerable yourself. It's comforting. One of the things that you said, and I don't know if I wrote it down word for word, but you said grief is our medicine, and
Yeah.
your heart and soul has a way of healing itself. I also remember you sharing the last time we spoke that grief is not always, it's not just when you lose someone to death. And so I just wanted to say to you on tonight, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Humbled to be here and appreciate that. Yeah, and thanks for your vulnerability too. See, it's interesting. Like, I mean, you see how I spend my time in these waters, and even I'm under sway of this dominant discourse that men can't cry. So I cry a little here, and I cry a lot when I do this, and I apologize to you, and I kind of ask for forgiveness. So there's a strong culture working against these ideas, I think. And I guess I thank you for acknowledging the work and taking it in. I mean, that's all I would hope for, is that, people take these moments in. So thank you so much, Tana. Yeah.
Thank you. Grace B, you have your hand up?
Yes, so I have two questions. Can I ask just one at a time? Okay.
Please.
So sometimes I feel that instead of going forward, when I'm healing, I feel that I'm going backwards, because I start like having those like sadness and anger, again. So how can I like go back when I was where I was, like more stable and all of that, instead of like having all of these emotions at the same time.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate the question, and I have two ideas about it. Is one part of it, and this is with respect to the discomfort you likely feel when you're sliding in what you think is a backwards direction. I think part of it is, trusting that process, that grief has its way in the direction it needs to go, and that, nothing moves solely forward. Everything moves side to side and front to back. And, part of it might be reminding yourself of that yes, this hurts, and yes, I don't like where I'm at now, and it feels like regression or some kind of loss of progress. And maybe it's just what your grief is needing in that time. And that it will right itself. It will move in a different direction when it's time to move in that direction. So having a lot of patience and empathy for yourself, and really trusting what your grief is needing you to do. And I would say you're not at all abnormal in that regard. Like, I have never met with anybody whose grief is, step after step, things that they would clearly say progress. I think it often requires us to go back and revisit things, feel things again, maybe feel new things that we don't want to feel. So that's one idea I have, is just trying to comfort yourself and let the grief do its thing. The other way of looking at it, I guess, or another way, there's probably oodles of ways, is sometimes we have awareness of things we're doing or strategies we use to be in a certain place. So, one question you could ask yourself, is sort of like, okay, when I was moving in the direction I was wanting to move, like, what was I doing then? How did I do that? When I was stuck going backwards before, how did I turn this ship around? Like, there are different, possibly things you have done in the past and could do again in theory that would help move things in the direction you're wanting to move. But that, I also think, there's some caution there, because then it's sort of like, well, if my grief is needing this right now, am I somehow getting in the way of that or impeding that? So I think it's a balanced approach. And obviously we also need to, function in this world. This is one of my soapboxes that maybe Tana heard me get on one time, but we don't really have much room to grieve and mourn in this world. Like, you have a full-time job, you get 3 days off of work, and then it's like, all right, back at it, sport. I think the world and the demands of life, and I mean, you all got a lot going on, I'm sure of it, that we don't really have the luxury and the privilege of just saying, I'm going to be a mess for this week, and whatever happens, but I'm just going to do this for myself and let my grief out. So I think that's part of it too, is we need to, I don't know, be functional members of society or something along those lines. And we really just lack the luxury of, I don't know, staying in bed till noon, and some of these other things that our heart and soul might demand of us. So I hope that was modestly helpful.
Yeah, and I do have another question, and it's do you really get to a point where all of that repressed pain is released?
Yeah, most people, and it's everybody's different, but I think with time and with grieving, and putting in all the energy that's required to grieve, and that, I think what most people describe is that there is sort of some softening of the experience that happens with time. Not that they won't still have moments of intensity or situations that bring on a grief surge or something like that. But often it's this is something that hurts, but it's not consuming my life force. It's not something that's necessarily darkening my days. But it still hurts. I think that's part of it, and that's why I got a little choked up when I was talking about, what if that sorrow, and what if that grief is a way of us just keeping people that are important to us around and keeping them in this world. I just think that's a really beautiful place for that hurt. It's not that I'm sick or weak or defective or bad or anything. It's I'm remembering somebody that made a difference to me, that mattered to me, that I loved. And yeah, I want to feel sorrowful for that, because that's part of their life here on earth that keeps them alive for me. That's how I pay my respect. That's how I praise what we've had. So I guess I would say it's yes. I think there is a softening often, and there's also an ongoing aching, and it's always true. It's always been true, and that's a fascinating thing, to sometimes think about, is to do like a loss review, just starting at the beginning of your life and writing down all the losses you've experienced. And when I've done this with people, they're often quite surprised about all of the things they've been grieving and have grieved and are still grieving, going way back to childhood often. So it's something that's always there. There's a metaphor that I stole from someone that I don't remember, but the grief is our shadow, that it always is walking beside us wherever we go. It's our constant companion in life as we move through the world. And sometimes when I see my shadow on the sidewalk, I think of that, like, all right, it's always there. It's just a matter of not whether I'm noticing it and paying attention and naming it as such, but it's always there with me. Yeah. So thank you for the questions, Grace. I hope that helped.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah. We actually have time for one more question or comment. So Veronica, I see you have your hand up. I will let you ask that.
Thanks. So I was, a lot of the latter comments that you had said, Ben, like resonated a lot with me, and it kind of brought up something that I read about delayed grief, because in my grief journey, I'd had just like lately, especially since I started the loss and grief class, I had to quit for the first time in my life since like I lost my husband 13 years ago, and I've been raising my kids by myself since then. And it's just like, when you said it was like almost relatable to like a cycle or like a grief cycle, it reminded me of something I read about delayed grief. Because after I lost my husband, I didn't have time to grieve. I had to keep my kids. Like I didn't have family help, or I had to find my own resources and my own support system. And throughout the years, that's all I've been doing. It's just like constant looking for resources for everything.
Yeah.
And and that was kind of disheartening for me to think like, am I jaded by life? Like I just you just want to rip off the rest of life like a Band-Aid, and not like to think suicidal or anything like that. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Well, my condolences to you, and I'm trying to think what feeling. I feel, I don't know. I just feel very, very uplifted, I guess, maybe, that you can grieve now, that now is your time. And it sounds like you've waited a long time to do this, and to really, really have the space for that. And I'm very touched that you're able to do that now, and may you continue doing it. And unfortunately, I think you're in a situation that's all too common, is the demands of life don't support this. We have to get back to it. And single mom, I mean, my goodness, the amount of responsibility and things you've had to manage and take care of and handle, like, yeah, of course you had to put that away for a while. And I'm happy your heart is open to it now, and I wish you well as you tend to that.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you to everyone who shared. And I recognize so many names. I have a lot of my students are in this group, but also my colleagues and just people that maybe I've seen you on campus. And something that Ben always says, and I've written it down so many times, is that grief keeps our hearts open, and it keeps our hearts soft, and that it connects us all. And while we were watching that video and the word cloud, we were connected. And I just want you all to know that we are in each other's hearts tonight. And that's a really powerful thing. Samantha.
Thank you, Amy. What a wonderful program and event tonight, and just this wonderful discussion that we were having, and I'm sorry that it has to end. I'm going to talk about the care package that you all will be getting. You'll receive a care package. It'll come in one of these United States Postal Service priority mail envelopes. And then there'll be a cover letter inside with each of the items. And I just want to quickly go through the items with you because we're excited about them. So one of the first items, there's an envelope here. It's kind of tie-dyed in color. And we're calling this the When Grief Hits activity. And there's this cute little sticker. So if you want to find like a fun little jar or something, you can put the sticker on it. And then you can place all of these fun activity cards into your jar. And when grief hits, we don't know when that's going to be, to help either feel your feelings more, go deeper with them, to lean into them, not to push through them, but lean into them, or to find different ways of coping. We have all these little activity cards. So you might call a friend you can really talk to, or a relative you haven't talked to in a while. Or if grief is getting you down, you might take some time to do your favorite hobby. Those are just a couple of different ideas. Then I can't remember who asked this question, so I apologize, but it's about journaling. So we do have a blank journal that we're sending you. And then we also have different ideas of how to start journaling. So that will be coming to you as well. We have, I love that Ben tied this in as well with spring and planting, but we are sending you some wildflower seeds. And what better way to remember someone's life by planting a flower, tree, a bush, anything like that. So we're sending some seeds so you can put them in a special place, even if it's just in a pot, where you can grow something and remember a loved one that you've lost. And then we also have different postcards. This is a way of connecting with different people in your life that were actually drawn by one of our former students, of course, in Amy's class. And they're beautiful postcards, and it helps with stress relief. So we're also sending you these colored pencils. So if you're just feeling like you need a distraction, you need some stress relief, you can color in a postcard and then write a fun little message to someone that you love and send it in the mail, because who doesn't like getting something physical? I got a thank you card from a student today and I started bawling. And then, of course, my favorite, which it's still in its package and hasn't been opened, but some chocolate. And the idea of the chocolate, we have then a mindful eating exercise. And again, this just helps with stress relief, anxiety, but just some different ways for you to relieve some of the feelings that you're having, lean into them, have them in healthy ways. So that will be coming to you after the event through the US mail. And then I'm going to pass it on to one of our lovely former students, Marissa.
Hi, everybody. As Samantha said, my name is Marissa, and I'm a former student of North Hennepin Community College. And I will be closing tonight's event with a poem titled When Great Trees Fall by Maya Angelou. When great trees fall, rocks on distant hills shudder. Lions hunker down in tall grasses, and even elephants lumber after safety. When great trees fall in forests, small things recoil into silence, their senses eroded beyond fear. When great souls die, the air around us becomes light, rare, sterile. We breathe briefly. Our eyes briefly see with a hurt clarity. Our memory, suddenly sharpened, examines, gnaws on kind words unsaid, promised walks never taken. Great souls die, and our reality, bound to them, takes leave of us. Our souls dependent upon their nurture, now shrink, wizened. Our minds, formed and informed by their radiance, fall away. We are not so much maddened as reduced to the unutterable ignorance of dark, cold caves. And when great souls die, after a period, peace blooms. Slowly and always irregularly, spaces fill with a kind of soothing electric vibration. Our senses, restored, never to be the same, whisper to us. They existed. They existed. We can be and be better, for they existed. Thank you all once again, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your night.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Yes, thank you. You'll see on the screen the support resources we mentioned earlier, since we weren't able to put in the chat if anyone needs them.
This was a really cool event. Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you. The
Thank
event
you
was
for
wonderful.
coming.
Thank you.
And everybody.
Thank you again, Ben, for everything you shared. It was super helpful.
Thank you for what you shared.
Bye, everyone.
Good night. Thank you again for coming.